Hashtags, retweets, mentions. These are just some of the terms that are a normal part of today's internet vocabulary, and Twitter is responsible. Twitter is one of the largest social media platforms in the world, with approximately 300 million active users. But there's a problem. It is also one of the most hated social media platforms. The social media site is a cesspool of toxicity, where enraged users find a safe haven to propagate their disgusting views and bully people online. Homophobia, sexism, racism, and xenophobia thrive on Twitter. But there's a lot more to this story. Quite interesting, right? Luckily for you, today we're going to talk about why Twitter is hated so much. A social media platform with the intention of connecting people has become the very place people avoid? Why is that? Well, stay with us as we answer these questions and more. So, let's dive right in. In order to get a context of why things have reached this point, it is important to trace Twitter back to its origins and find out why it became so famous in the first place. This is the good side of Twitter. Humble beginnings. Twitter emerged from the podcasting venture Odeo, which was founded in 2004 by Evan Williams, Biz Stone, and Noah Glass. Williams and Stone had previously worked at Google, and Williams had created the popular web authoring tool Blogger. Apple announced in 2005 that it would add podcasts to its digital media application iTunes, and Odeo's leadership felt that the company could not compete with Apple and that a new direction was needed. Odeo's employees were asked about many interesting side projects they had, and engineer Jack Dorsey proposed a short message service on which one could share small blog-like updates with friends. Glass proposed the name Twitter, TWTTR. Dorsey sent the first tweet, "Just setting up my Twitter," on March 21, 2006, and the completed version of Twitter debuted in July 2006. Seeing a future for the product, in October 2006, Williams, Stone, and Dorsey bought out Odeo and started Obvious Corp to further develop it. Interest in the platform sharply increased after it was presented at the South by Southwest Music and Technology Conference in Austin, Texas in March 2007. The following month, Twitter Inc. was created as a corporate entity, thanks to an infusion of venture capital, and Dorsey became Twitter's first CEO. In 2008, Williams ousted Dorsey as CEO, and 2 years later, Williams was replaced as CEO by Chief Operating Officer Dick Costolo. From novelty to a news source. Twitter's social networking roots were obvious in April 2009, when actor Ashton Kutcher emerged as the victor in a race with CNN to become the first Twitterer to collect more than 1 million followers. While celebrity e-watching remained a significant draw to the service, businesses soon began sending tweets about promotions and events, and political campaigns discovered the value of Twitter as a communication tool. In the 2008 U.S. presidential election, Barack Obama dominated his opponent, John McCain, in the social media sphere, amassing almost 4 times as many MySpace friends and more than 20 times as many Twitter followers. This development virtually ensured that future candidates would include a social networking presence as part of their media strategies. Perhaps the most noteworthy step in the evolution of Twitter, though, was its increased use as a tool for journalists. Twitter was transformed into an up-to-the-second news source that transcended political borders. On January 15, 2009, a tweet by commuter ferry passenger Janice Crumbs broke the story of the successful water landing of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River in New York City. A hastily snapped camera phone image of passengers disembarking the half-submerged aircraft was uploaded to twitpic.com, a photo hosting service for Twitter users. The site promptly crashed as thousands of Twitter users attempted to view it at once. Twitter truly established itself as an emerging outlet for the dissemination of information during the events surrounding the Iranian presidential election in June 2009. As state media sources reported that President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad had secured an easy victory, the supporters of opposition candidate Mir Hossein Mousavi took to the streets in a series of demonstrations that eventually provoked a crackdown by the government, in which some demonstrators were injured or killed. The topic #IranElection became one of the most followed on Twitter, as Mousavi supporters coordinated protests and posted live updates of events throughout the Iranian capital. On June 16th, 4 days after the election, foreign journalists were banned from covering opposition rallies, and Twitter, along with other social networking sites, filled the void left by the traditional media. Government security officers tried to staunch the flow of information by blocking individual Twitterers, while opposition supporters urged #IranElection followers to change their profile settings to the Tehran time zone in an attempt to overwhelm government filters. Although the protests did not result in a change in the election results or a new election, the tweets of de facto journalists showed the potential of non-traditional media to circumvent government censorship. Following the earthquake that struck Haiti in January 2010, Twitter reaffirmed its role as a powerful tool for the dissemination of information. Additionally, it became an effective fundraising platform when the Red Cross launched a mobile giving campaign that surpassed all expectations. High-profile users tweeted about the drive to help victims of the earthquake, and many of their followers tweeted and retweeted the message, helping the Red Cross raise more than $8 million within 48 hours of the quake. Dorsey returned as CEO in October 2015. Twitter had continued to grow in popularity, but it had still not become profitable, so it added other features in an effort to increase user interaction. Twitter added a new feature, Moments, in October 2015, which allowed users and the service itself to create curated thematic collections of tweets and other content. Moments were displayed prominently in their own tab in the app, but in January 2017, Twitter replaced Moments with Explore, in which trending subjects, including moments, were collected. The character limit of a tweet was increased from 140 to 280 characters in 2017. Fleets, added in November 2020, were collections of tweets and other content that were designed to vanish within 24 hours, much like stories on the social networks Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. However, Fleets failed to catch on with users, and the feature was discontinued in August 2021. In May 2021, Twitter introduced Spaces, in which accounts with more than 600 followers could host live audio conversations. The most radical change occurred in March 2016, when Twitter replaced its chronological timeline with an algorithmic timeline, in which tweets that were popular on the service, or even tweets that were liked by the people a user followed, would appear first. Twitter claimed this change made users interact with others and even tweet more, but some criticized it as creating an experience that would produce an information bubble, confirming users in their existing biases. Twitter finally became profitable in the last quarter of 2017, when it had 330 million monthly users. Early in 2019, Twitter switched from tracking monthly users to monetizable daily active users, the number of users in a day who were exposed to ads. As of late 2021, the service had 217 million monetizable daily active users. In November 2021, Dorsey stepped down as CEO again and was replaced by Chief Technology Officer Parag Agrawal. In 2022, Twitter announced that it was to be purchased by South African-born American entrepreneur Elon Musk for about $44 billion. Musk was to become the sole owner of the company, but the deal fell through. Now, we're all caught up. Hold on to your seats because we're only about halfway through. How did this successful social media giant, with such a rich history and potential to do so much good, end up becoming one of the most hated platforms in the world? Let us give you a hint. It has a lot to do with community standards and terms of service. So while you think, do subscribe to our channel and like our video. The problems. In order to get a good understanding of where the key issue lies, let us now go back to discuss an American far-right radio show host and conspiracy theorist, Alex Jones. Now, you may be wondering about how that is relevant to anything. Let us explain. After years spent politely enabling Alex Jones to tell vicious lies about Sandy Hook families, September 11th victims, and what happens in the basement of a pizza restaurant in suburban Washington, D.C., the world's largest tech companies began scrubbing him from their platforms. Citing to their community standards or terms of service, Apple, Facebook, YouTube, and Stitcher banned the network of channels and pages and podcasts with which he earned millions of followers. His email marketing clients severed their relationship. Pinterest took away his pin box. Even LinkedIn, a site that will normally do anything to get users to engage with it, asked Jones to find a different medium through which to tend to his professional network. The lone holdout? Twitter. The service, which aspires to deliver breaking news and fun dog photos, but in fact serves as a virtual playground for Nazis, will not be banning InfoWars, explained CEO Jack Dorsey in a plaintive follow-up thread, because it has no legitimate reason for doing so. If the company were to stop enforcing its principles impartially and regardless of political viewpoints, he wrote, it would become a service that's constructed by our personal views. To Dorsey, things like school shootings are staged and the government controls the weather count as political viewpoints that he must protect from the dangers of creeping censorship. Twitter affords a longer leash than its competitors to hate speech, misinformation, and conspiracy theories because those things have been intrinsic to the company's success, practically since the day it launched. In a 2017 profile, co-founder Evan Williams reflected on the lessons he'd learned over his career in Silicon Valley. I thought once everybody could speak freely and exchange information and ideas, the world is automatically going to be a better place, he said. Based on recent events, he admitted that optimism appears to have been misplaced. The platform that helped launch the Arab Spring and Black Lives Matter and the presidential candidacy of Barack Obama is also largely responsible for the ascendance of the elderly racist who took his place. The way the company operates today rests on the same assumption, though, that whether or not you think it should police its virtual public square, there is no need for it to do so because shame will prevent those tempted to use Twitter for evil from following through on that impulse. Just as it prevents most of them from shouting ethnic slurs, say, at the office or in the product aisle. No one will listen to those responsible for breaches of decorum because their opinions are inherently bad and humanity is inherently good. Eventually, the carnival barkers and casual bigots alike will vanish, starved of oxygen by this hyper-efficient marketplace of ideas. Twitter's confidence in this framework is why it is still so reticent to ban anyone, even someone like Jones, from using the service. The company envisions itself as a content-neutral provider of a safe place for speech that it assumes will be, in the aggregate, good. When viewed through this lens, the flare-ups of racism and sexism and homophobia and fear-mongering lies are unfortunate but insignificant side effects of living in a society in which the proverbial discourse, thanks to Twitter, grows freer and more civil by the hour. The most famous beneficiaries of this system's permissiveness are people like Jones and Richard Spencer and Milo Yiannopoulos, whose names you know because they use Twitter in a very intentional way to launch full-blown careers as racist provocateurs. But for most of its early adopters, Twitter was just a fun place where regular people could riff and vent and muse, shouting into the void about their jobs or their parents or their sexual conquests or their team's terrible quarterback, or loathing of gay people or their race's inherent superiority without fear of meaningful consequences. Collecting the unfiltered thoughts of the internet's collective id was the site's highest and best use. This dynamic is responsible for the recent spate of public figures who have faced hard questions about what they typed into a box as teenagers and then promptly forgot about. While Sean Newcomb was pitching a near no-hitter for the Atlanta Braves last month, users discovered that he frequently employed a certain homophobic slur as a college freshman. As an 18-year-old prospect, national shortstop Trey Turner did the same. At 17, Brewers reliever Josh Hader tweeted, without any more context, KKK. UFC fighter Cody Garbrandt dropped a ton of N-bombs between 2012 and 2013. Excavating #problematic posts has evolved from a Gamergate niche hobby to a standard part of vetting anyone standing at the doorstep of fame. and there are many people to whom a diligent review of their transcript is unkind. Twitter has become such a cesspool of awfulness that, in a strange meta-development, bad faith actors are now using this strategy to target women and people of color, pretending not to understand the difference between, for example, recently excavated evidence of bona fide bigotry and dumb jokes that make fun of white people. Sarah Jeong, whose timeline is riddled with such shocking and offensive statements such as #CancelWhitePeople and "it must be so boring to be white," managed to keep her job at the Times, but just barely. The process that has proven effective at outing racists has become a weapon of the same racists who were so attracted to Twitter in the first place. The presumption of anonymity seems ridiculous now. That Twitter is just Twitter, and that no one will notice a notable person's ill-advised tweet and immediately post a screenshot in case the offender deletes it in a fit of self-awareness. But 8 years ago, many of those who are now among its more visible members had no idea they'd ever have a reason to care about what others think of their darker and viler proclivities. Once upon a time, Josh Hader was just a guy, and he used Twitter the same way everyone else did. As the generation that began tweeting in middle school starts applying for jobs and earning scholarships and signing rookie deals and seeking political office, the advanced search tools are going to get even more would-be famous people to tell on themselves in the years to come. Whether a given bad tweet is the product of racism, ignorance, or a poorly developed sense of humor will always be in the eye of the retweeter. But whatever their genesis, it isn't an accident that so many bad old tweets exist in the first place, and why the company is in no hurry to excise those who traffic in them. Hatred was hardwired into Twitter from its inception, because it has always encouraged the whole world to revel in being the worst versions of themselves in 140 or 280 character bursts. The only price of this steady flow of bigotry-fueled traffic is the occasional outrage cycle that disappears in a few days, buried underneath the next clever hashtag or unhinged Trump rant. Twitter is happy to pay it every single time. So, are you a regular user of Twitter? How has your experience been? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to watch more of our amazing videos, then stay tuned.